Thank you so much for joining us here today. This is the third webinar in the VROMO series, and today I'm joined by some very esteemed guests, Brandy and Marcus, who I will allow them to introduce themselves very shortly. But what we're talking about today is making delivery effortless. And this is something that we really toyed around with the title of this to try and make it accessible for everybody, but also keep it broad enough to really kind of give restaurant operators some value out of the session today. So before we jump into it, I'm going to hand over. Brandy, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alan. Hi, I'm Brandy Villarreal, and I lead online food delivery for Uber Direct, which is Uber's white label delivery service. I grew up in my family's Tex-Mex restaurant here in Dallas, owned a food vending business after college, and have worked a variety of operations and technology roles in the industry over the last 15 years. I'm really excited to partner with this expert panel to highlight how delivery can be effortless for brands of all sizes.
Awesome. Marcus probably needs little introduction given your role, but do you want to, for the very few people who don't know who Marcus is, Marcus, you might want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, my name is Marcus Vasidi. I am a representative of Winsight Media. So we're a B2B media marketing company that puts on trade shows and conferences in the restaurant industry. So our biggest show is obviously the National Restaurant Association show that's coming up May 20th through the 23rd in Chicago. We do a bunch of different smaller events, big shows, small shows, but really it's all just about connecting operators and suppliers. This is a large, vibrant, amazing industry that I feel very fortunate to be a part of, and obviously get to work with great folks like you all.
Awesome. So for all the attendees, just to kind of speak to what we're going to try and do today, we've got kind of three high-level topics that I hope are going to spark some interesting conversation, possibly a little bit of debate. And really then at the end, it's about Q&A and trying to answer some of the questions that you guys have. I think, this is a consistent theme that I've said is the lack of sharing sometimes in the industry is a bit baffling. The consistent concerns, worries, stresses that myself and Brandy and Marcus here is unbelievably similar. So what we're trying to do in this webinar series is really just kind of lift the veil and maybe demystify some of the scary things that people are nervous about deploying, changing, setting up. And given the year that we're in now, 2023, and the absolute lunacy that we've come through over the last 2 years, is probably a good time. So with that, before we jump into our first topic, Marcus, can I ask you to kind of weigh in here, just given your kind of overarching view of the market, and Winsight kind of taps into an awful lot of different areas.
Yep.
How do you guys see the industry and what's going on, and maybe some of the big movers over the last year or two?
Yeah, so obviously the last 3 years have been incredibly challenging for the restaurant industry. I think March 2020 was really an existential crisis, and if we're being fully honest and transparent with ourselves, the industry is smaller. Right now, today, we sit about 75, 80,000 less locations than our pre-pandemic, pre-COVID levels. But I personally think that correction was necessary and overdue. You see the restaurants that didn't survive. It was a lot of independents. It was a lot of fledgling franchise locations. It was a lot of different brands that were kind of on their last legs. And, personally, I think necessity is kind of the mother of invention. And we as an industry pivoted from just a straight brick and mortar business. I open my doors, I serve food, I close the doors, and I rinse and repeat day in and day out. And I personally liken what's happening to the industry from about retail 10 years ago. We're going from that brick and mortar experience to that omni-channel experience. And that's everything. First party, third party delivery, catering, to go, pickup, and all of these changes and evolution in both operationally, but also consumer preferences has created a lot of opportunity, but it's also created a lot of confusion and problems. And we're seeing across the board, consumers are more interested in delivery than ever before. Takeout is something that they want to do, but they're concerned about cost and price. They're also aware of the cost for the operator. Everybody knows that business is challenging right now. Labor, staffing, just inflation, pricing, everything across the board is challenging. So consumers are much more acutely aware of who they're doing business with. Is that business successful? Are they going to stay open? Are they going to be, my neighborhood joint going forward? And I just think all of these challenges are an opportunity for the industry. It's an opportunity for us to run our businesses more efficiently. It's an opportunity for us to really become, a professional industry that takes advantage of some of these challenges and opportunities in front of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the similarities to the retail sector, it's incredible. It's almost like history repeating itself. Maybe a little tweak here and there, but it feels like we're certainly on a well-trodden path. And this industry's challenge is, how do we take the knowledge and the learnings from what went on in retail, not make the same mistakes, and ultimately end up in a better position? And you raise an interesting point around the reduction in the size of the market, because the irony here is customers are spending more. They're just spending more in less locations, right? So, we always talk about anybody can be busy, but being busy and profitable is a very different thing. And I think that's what the last 3 years kind of showed. So maybe kind of rolling that forward and jumping into the first topic, which was, the state of the industry, how technology has played. It's like we planned this, by the way. We've got a big tech provider on, and I'm going to ask them how the market has changed. But Brandy, like you began life in a Tex-Mex restaurant, and looking at where restaurants have come from 10 years ago to now. And, we were joking before the call about staff now don't want to do 3-day weeks. They think everything is technology enabled. And you've got these restaurateurs sitting there going, what's a point of sale? How do I dispatch to Uber? Like, it's, to Marcus's points, it's an absolute minefield. So given your very unique background of restaurateur, your journey through Uber, how do you kind of see the state of the restaurant sector now, particularly with a view to how dominant technology is becoming in the conversation?
Absolutely. So before Uber, I was with a food and beverage analytics company for nearly 10 years. And we saw the very quick shift from on-premise POS to cloud-based systems and the proliferation of so many pieces of technology across the industry. It was already becoming overwhelming for restaurateurs to decide who I partner with, why I do it, how I'm doing it, and then how you stack rank that against your priorities, which are inevitably going to be the guests in your restaurant and the fires we know can happen within your own four walls. I started at Uber in January of 2020, and that was on the marketplace team. At the time, Uber Eats was the much smaller sibling of our mobility business, and we've seen a substantial shift in that dynamic over the last 3 years. But I had an opportunity to partner with national and regional brands who really came to us for new customer acquisition, and then starting to fine-tune those methods to understand how you retain customers. And I believe white label delivery is something that's new to a lot of brands today. It can be the next shift in digital evolution, but people are questioning how I do it and what makes sense to decide on my tech stack and decide who I'm partnering with as part of that evolution as well. But we know the numbers. Digital ordering has increased so significantly over the past few years, and it's not going anywhere. The convenience and choices that customers have at their fingertips and accessible within their apps are putting them in a different mindset for their frequent decisions in determining dining occasions.
Yeah, there's a Pandora's box there that I could open, but I might wait until the second topic. But on that, and Marcus, you, like, given Winsight and what you guys try to do, so you're trying to bring vendors, you're trying to bring restaurateurs together. I mean, that's a menu that has to be pretty curated to make sure that you're getting it on point. And we would all love to say, yes, they all want to talk about technology, but what is it that they come and they say we need help with, or where are they pointing those conversations and decisions for you guys to curate these shows and, these trade events that are going to drive real value for people?
Yeah, well, Winsight has obviously benefited from the tech explosion, if you will. I mean, white label first party delivery didn't really even exist 4 or 5 years ago. So all of these things are relatively new. And the biggest thing that we're hearing from attendees and restaurateurs is that it's a little overwhelming. You know, there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of different integrations and partnerships and services, and they want to focus on what they're great at, which is running restaurants, delighting guests, you know, keeping people coming back and kind of driving that frequency so they can increase their same store sales. And that's the same kind of sentiment from a single unit independent to the largest enterprise brands in the world. But with all of this new stuff that's out there, they're coming to these conferences and events and trying to figure out, like, who do they work with? What are the different partnerships that I enable? What allows my brands and individuals and frontline employees to operate most effectively? Because I personally think technology is only as good as simple as it is. And if it's something that is arduous and something that is challenging and something that is just not easy to use, your frontline employees aren't going to use it. They're not going to understand it. And it's something that is just going to be relegated to the back. So that's really the biggest thing I'm seeing from operators, is just this desire for simplicity and really a desire for understanding of who to work with and really the best way to kind of go to market with some of these solutions.
Yeah, and look, I think from my perspective, and as a company that only works in food delivery and the food vertical, I think like all emerging markets, like all new kind of gold rushes, unfortunately, there can be a lot of snake oil salesmen out there as well, and they're promising sun, moon, and stars, and it actually muddies the water even further. So, you know, one of the things that we're going to discuss today, and honestly, one of the things that I'm interested to kind of hear how Uber have done this, for example, is how do you become that trusted partner, and what does it mean, and how does the evolution filter into that? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of restaurants out there that would look with Uber and go, oh my God, I'm terrified of them, and this, that, and the other. And of course you can believe what you want, but as a partner of Uber, I know that they constantly think about evolving their business model, helping each use case, fitting into the way they operate, and keeping them in their lane. And I think that's a really, really cool thing, because, you know, there's highs and lows about deploying technology. People get overwhelmed. So from Uber's perspective, Brandy, and even like the way we work together, where do you think the high of this is when technology is adopted and it's really, really good, versus the low, people get overwhelmed, they probably have inertia to change and they go, actually, I'm not going to do it. Like, how do you kind of see that playing out at the moment?
Absolutely. So there was an urgency to adopt, of course, during 2020. Brands who hadn't already entered into contracts with major delivery service providers found themselves being almost backlogged and wondering how I can get in the door and do so quickly. And we had teams that were working throughout the night. We had teams across the globe building menus for partners. And I think the willingness to understand their urgency, to feel their problems, and then to continue the communication. It's not just getting you in the door, it's what we do afterwards in order to proactively advise, to bring you best practices from other organizations, because this isn't just technology, it's how it intersects with your operations. Where are people picking up orders? How can we seamlessly communicate between the restaurant, that courier, your end customer, to ensure that that's a delightful experience for all parts of that marketplace? And, you know, for us, having partner management teams, a lot of them coming from the restaurant, hospitality, customer success industry, is really important, because empathy has to come first. Of course, now that the world is opened up again, we love the opportunity to get into restaurants, to learn more about how each one of our brands operate, so that we can bring their experience to the front line. Ultimately, we want our restaurant partners to have a front seat in our development process, so that we can prioritize what's key. Is it analytics? Is it something like, you know, a refund process coming to us directly, being able to chat in versus having to email to support? All of those things save time and attention, so that operators can focus what's most important for their business.
And like, speaking to how VROMO works with Uber, I mean, that's kind of why we ended up having that conversation, because traditionally you hire your own drivers, away you go, we're going to optimize it. But the world changed. Labor shortages came in, driver recruitment was a nightmare. And I think it's interesting that around the same time, DoorDash Drive appears, Uber Direct appears, Glovo Delivery as a Service appears. Like there's a common theme there. Would you say that kind of evolution was directly led by market demand, or do you think it's more a looking at the market and realizing that that's where that demand is going to present itself?
For direct, I think it certainly came from both sides. So Uber Direct, existed out of a unique partnership with a couple of very large restaurant organizations who wanted us to power their own deliveries. But then through the acquisition of Postmates, we had a lot more power, a lot more technology and experience that was brought to this mix, and understood that we could proactively advise customers of all sizes for enabling white label with their delivery business. Of course, you mentioned VROMO is unique to the restaurant space. We do partner with other verticals as well, retail, convenience, grocery, and that's been part of the evolution of Uber as well, to go anywhere, get anything, and offer so many different types of experiences to our customers.
And so in a world, and the evolution is completely understandable, especially for an opportunity and a company the size of Uber. But bringing it back to your mom and dad and their Tex-Mex, I would think that potentially makes that decision even harder again, because if somebody comes in and I only do food delivery, I work with food companies, this is what I do, the mom and pop shop, the shoulders drop a little. It's like, okay, this is what they do, this is their bread and butter. Like, Marcus, do you think that kind of, I suppose, inertia or fear around, holy moly, like tech stacks were this complicated, now they're this complicated, they serve multi-verticals, I'm just terrified I'm going to stick with receipts and printing stuff off and handing it to my niece and sending her out on a bike? Like, do you hear that fear in the adoption of technology at the moment, or am I creating monsters that aren't there?
No, I think you're spot on. I think right now it's kind of the big integration, and we have all these disparate systems that work, but they work in a silo. And really, for these restaurants to most efficiently and optimize their operations, and that's everything from a consumer ordering food on their phone, for it being funneled into the point of sale, making sure that food is picked up on time when it's not sitting there for 30, 45 minutes, and then making sure that food is delivered in a time that consumer expects. All of that is a lot of different moving pieces and moving parts. And what I'm personally seeing is the solutions exist, they do, but what are the right integrations? Who is the right point of sale partner? Who's the right third-party delivery partner? Who's the first-party delivery, partner that will allow me to most effectively run my operation efficiently? I don't think we've figured it out entirely, but I do think in the coming years and months, you're going to see a single source that will allow folks to kind of have a little bit better path and easier, go to market plan, rather than trying to kind of put all these systems together on their own. And I think that's what the industry is really looking for is, what is the best way to do it? I don't want to spend 6 months, 12 months trying to figure this out, having to fail over and over and over again, and ultimately disappoint the customer, to be able to kind of get to this place where I really believe that we can get there very quickly.
Yeah, like disappointing the customer raises an interesting point, because when we were trying to put this together, we were toying around with some topics, with some themes, and one of the ones that kept popping up, and I've kind of mentioned that I think all marketplaces are doing this, but they're not a binary solution anymore. Like Uber Eats has got multiple offerings, depending on the use case, depending on the brand, depending on the location, depending on the geography. And that sometimes, before we get to how do you implement the right tech stack, is it fair to say that there is still a big knowledge gap in the vast majority of restaurants that says, let's be disparaging for a second, I don't want to work with Uber Eats because they're not going to fit my business. And we come in and go, actually, it's an order source that you should totally go and talk to, because it's going to be incremental order increases, managing it correctly. That's the challenge here. Like, Brandy, do you guys hear that, like, from the Uber Eats to Uber Direct side? And does that present itself? Like, are you educating brands as much as trying to get them on board and trying to trying to sell them and you know, work with them, is there an education path happening there simultaneously?
Certainly education happening simultaneously. And I think Marcus was referring to something like your speed to be able to try this, whether it's a trial, a pilot, a full rollout. All of those things are important because we know, especially independent operators, you don't have an IT team, you don't have a developer that is going to, you know, code, figure out the API integration, test, troubleshoot, release your own mobile app. You have to be able to leverage a lot of technology that already exists that is really formed to be able to bring your existing delivery menu, your existing paper menu, and easily embed that into what a customer can experience online, whether it's a website or a mobile app. And then what we plug in is using the scale and logistics of Uber to deliver that order. We understand where there is demand. We understand how you can route couriers and drivers to a specific area in order to ensure that those are picked up in a timely manner. We go into the details. Where are they picking up the order? Where should they park? Because all of these become natural questions that could create friction in the experience. And you could have, you know, an upset restaurant manager waiting for someone to pick up an order who has just never been to that restaurant before. Their heart is there. They want to deliver this order. They are doing it for earnings and trying to do so in a seamless manner themselves.
So it's funny because like the you know, Marcus, you've alluded to it as like that integrated system and ecosystem, and then Brandy, you're kind of speaking to the same thing around. They know they want to do it and they feel that this is the way to do it, but the how is often, like, you know, as we said at the top of the call, this is an absolute minefield. And you know, I go back to the pizza shop guy who's ran the store for 40 years. He makes amazing pizza. Sometime in the last 5 years ago, he had to become a technologist and understand APIs and code, which probably sounds like Japanese to him. And you know, that's okay, because that's our job. And our job is to certainly translate that. Like we spoke when we were prepping this about similarities. And Marcus, you kind of alluded to retail, and I think about like the hotel industry as well, and the booking.com conundrum. If you had to turn around to every hotelier 15 years ago and said, you're going to be listed on 50 different aggregators and that's where all your bookings are going to come from, they probably would have been shocked and gaffed and said, absolutely not. Is it fair to say we're going to see something as drastic materialize in food, or is that one of those things that we're going to see a learning from? That it won't be the booking.com, but there will be marketplaces, they will play a very prominent role, but they'll maybe sitting in a lane more so than what happened in the hotel industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the school of thought that all of these things are going to be symbiotic at some point. There's going to be third party, there's going to be marketplaces, there's going to be direct. And the goal here for the restaurant operator is that you want to provide a ubiquitous experience. So however that customer wants to find you, however they feel comfortable, however they, you know, want to make a decision about where they're going to order food, who they're going to order from, and when they're going to do it. It doesn't matter if it's a third party, if it's a marketplace, or if it's first party. You as the operator just want to ensure that that food is prepared in a timely manner, it's delivered in a clean, safe manner, and ultimately you delight the guest so that person wants to come back to you. And, you know, I look at, you know, OpenTable as a prime example of kind of like what's happening right now with marketplaces and delivery. OpenTable, you know, was kind of the originator in bookings in restaurants. And, you know, people, I think, initially had fears and qualms with it. Who are you? What are you doing? Do you own the customer? Do I own the customer? But eventually, these full service fine dining establishments looked at it as customer acquisition and revenue growth. And that, I think, is where we need to get to with delivery in general. Is the consumer doesn't care. They're going to find you how they want to find you. And it's our responsibility as providers and, you know, tech, you know, enablers to let you do your job best, which is make pizza for 40 years.
Yeah. And it kind of leads into the third discussion topic. We were going to go into like putting that right tech stack together and understanding it, but maybe keeping it out of the realms of APIs and tech stacks and terminology that people aren't going to understand. You said something very interesting, Marcus, about like that experience being ubiquitous and you know, regardless of channel, regardless of customer, regardless of fulfillment, having the same experience. Because like if we boil this all down to the 40-year veteran in the pizza shop, what's he talking about? He's saying, I've got a family who's been ordering in my store for 20 years and they have an experience when that happens. And I want to get as close to that experience when we deliver it to their home, regardless of where the order came from, who the fleet was. And that's maybe where, as an industry, we need to get better, and we need to kind of clean up the language and simplify it to say we're talking about the exact same thing. Yes, we use SaaS words and APIs and all this kind of stuff, but ultimately it is that customer journey. It's that experience. It's that I had an awesome time in Stoner's Pizza last night, and I had an equally awesome time 4 days later when I ordered it to my house. So like Brandy, in your world, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, so please feel free to say absolutely not. But like Uber Direct would love everybody to outsource all the fulfillment to them all day, every day, because it's great volume for you guys. High five, away we go. VROMO's world is we would like everybody to go and hire drivers, own the entire customer journey themselves, and yet Uber and VROMO work together. So where do you guys sit with, when do we stop pushing the I want to do it all? And no, I understand you're going to do a little bit yourself and we're going to help you out a little bit, and that's okay. Like how do you define that line, and where does that sit in your mind?
Yes, every restaurant is at a different part of this journey. And that could be you've had your own delivery drivers or catering drivers as long as you've been around. And that's what you saw as necessary to offer the right experience for your guest. We would say, if that's your model, allow for us to fill in those inevitable times when someone calls in. I've been a restaurant manager who's like chasing a dishwasher out of the door and saying, do you have a tie and a button-down shirt? I really need you back here tonight. Like, promise it will be worth your time. We all know those moments exist. You could be in a college town and you understand that before 5 p.m., your staff is typically in classes and you want to be able to deliver a catering order or bring a delivery experience to someone nearby, whether that's their office, a hospital. So many different reasons someone needs to be able to rely on that convenience. And so we can fill in at the right times of day. And we have partnerships that exist where that's exactly what happens. They have their own delivery drivers, and we come in at the right times, whether it's late night or high mileage orders. There are other restaurants where it doesn't make sense. You're scrambling to even have a cashier on staff. You don't have the room to hire an additional delivery driver and ensure those are staffed in the right manner. That's where we have an opportunity to bring that omnichannel experience to a brand that hasn't been able to position themselves like that in the past. And so everyone's at a different point in time. And one thing that, I love about working with Uber Direct is we're not tying, to you working with us for a lifetime. There are evolutions in your model, and signing up to say, yes, I am going to have you fulfill my delivery orders doesn't mean this is a permanent stamp and something that can't be changed in the business model as your staffing and other decisions align to that.
Yeah. And like from our perspective, I think that's where that tech stack evolution comes. And Marcus, you'll know how busy this market is between online ordering, point of sale, aggregators, dispatch management, loyalty, inventory. I mean, it's pretty insane how many moving parts there are. But Brandy, one of the things you mentioned there is the evolution and where that journey kind of goes to. Because Marcus, I don't know if you hear this or if you see it, but I would say 9 times out of 10, if you scratch the surface with a pizza restaurant, what do you want to be? They'll eventually revert to, we'd like to run it like Domino's. That's the kind of, it's the North Star, right? It's an online ordering tool, which is unbelievably brand centric, integrated into a custom built POS with a delivery management software that they own. It's the North Star, but to the CEO's own words, they're a tech company that happens to sell pizza. And so what we're trying to do is effectively get most of the brands there. I think the big issue, though, that we see presenting itself, and it's why we seek partnerships, like Uber is, whilst the service of Uber Direct is amazing, the difficulty sometimes is in the implementation. So when, how, why, where do I engage? How do I call them? And looking at that tech stack, Marcus, do you think that it's the integration strength that's going to prevail in that who wins out in the ecosystem play? Or do you think it's, I just want to keep this super simple and I want one size fits all and deploy it to my 23 stores and away we go? Is it I'll have multiple operators if they're tied in, or I'd like it all to sit in the same category and same bucket?
Yeah, well, the great thing for the restaurant industry is that it's so fragmented and everyone is on a different digital maturity scale, okay? Like the single unit pizzeria independent owner operator wants it out of the box, simple, easy. I don't want to have to think about this. I just want to focus on what I'm great at, which is making pizza. But you have emerging chains, 50, 75 locations that have a CIO or a CTO that, you know, have data scientists on staff. And those folks need different solutions. And then you obviously have the brands that are rung below Domino's and are sitting there and saying, can we do what Domino's has done? So that to me kind of signifies that there is no one solution that is going to fit every single type of restaurateur and operator. But for every single one of those types of brands that are along the spectrum, we as an industry, as suppliers, as providers, need to provide solutions that enable these folks to do what they're great at and work through partnerships like VROMO and Uber to kind of bring solutions to the marketplace that are not just saying, here's this marketplace that you have to do, but these are innovative ideas, innovative ways that you guys can operate more efficiently, and then always get back to exciting and delighting your guests in a way that keeps them coming back for more. So it's really not just like a simple solution. You know, there's really different answers for different types of brands and different types of operators. But what I've been most impressed about, like kind of talking and speaking with you, is the flexibility and the nimbleness of both of your organizations and your willingness to partner with companies, to try new things, to test, iterate, and fail. And that's kind of what I'm seeing in the industry is, you know, amateur hours is over. You know, we've got to be professional. We've got to run these things, you know, like an enterprise, like at Domino's, even if we aren't one.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's where, you know, from VROMO's perspective, we've been so pleasantly surprised with the way Uber Direct particularly are thinking about this, because we obviously live in a world where we're about driving profitability back into restaurants, allowing them to have that flex in the use case. And again, like the hotel industry and the restaurant industry, if you had told me 3 years ago that we'd be sitting down with Uber and saying, you just, you know, you do the bits that they can't do and you're going to be high-fiving and celebrating, I was shocked. But it shows that the maturity level of the industry has gone to a whole new space. But also the vision of opportunity has gone to a whole new space as well, because doing that opens up huge array of restaurants, opportunities, volume, and Brandy, as you said, other verticals as well. You know, for your world, it's not just restaurants. So no, look, I think it's really interesting. On the just before we kind of wrap up that tech stack piece, Brandy, when we look at, say, the mom and pop, you know, your mom and dad's Tex-Mex, and Marcus, you kind of classified the next category. I think it was like the emerging scale. Do you see, because I have my own opinion on this, do you see a similarity in the conversation and the queries and the pain points, possibly wrapped up in different language because of data scientists and CIOs? Or do you think there are very disparate problems at either end of the scale of that restaurant estate when it comes to, do I use Uber Direct? How do I use Uber Direct? All of those dispatch and delivery focused questions.
I see many similarities, and the core comes back to, how are you going to make this great for my guest? And how is my customer going to see this as an experience that brings them back again? We know, of course, and we've seen it through marketplace relationships, and so often it costs more to acquire a new customer than to keep someone coming back again and again. So once you capture that person's attention, the experience has to be on par. And so I think that everything comes back to that question at its core. And then behind that is, how do I implement it? And that can, look very different ways for an SMB, your mom and pop, versus an enterprise organization. But us being able to thoughtfully plan, provide advice, let you know what happens if something goes wrong. Ultimately, those are core parts of our partnership experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. We've actually been running a poll while this has been on about how many marketplaces people list on, because there was a time where exclusivity was the buzzword, and it's really interesting. Like, we've got 62% of attendees are listing between 1 and 3, and 31% are on 0. Like, they're trying to do it themselves, and it's a question we get asked all the time, and even some of the questions we've got for our Q&A are leading towards this. Like, I don't know how many times I've been asked, should I work with DoorDash? Should I work with Uber? Should I work with Grubhub? Fundamentally, without shadow of a doubt, the answer is yes. In all examples, but work with them in the right way. Figure out what the right way is for your business, whether it's a direct Uber Eats and letting them fulfill, whether it's listing on Uber Eats and BYOC, whether it's just utilizing Uber Direct. Like, literally 3 completely different setups, but one of them will fit the business. And the same applies across most of the marketplaces now. And so that, to me, is where, whether it's through a VROMO or through a Winsight or through an Uber or whoever your core tech stack is, as a restaurateur, when you have that trusted relationship, ask the silly question. Like, you think it's, I don't want to ask it, I'll be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. Everybody's asking the exact same thing. Like, the 3,000 store opportunity is asking the same thing as the 3-site opportunity. They're just wrapping it up in a different way of saying it. So honestly, ask those questions about fulfillment, about do we do it all. Fran, you made a really good point around catering. It's like such a common topic. I want to do my own catering because they're $800 orders. Fine, do your own catering, but let the Uber guys, who are brilliant at 3-mile, 4-mile delivery, let them kill that, and you guys focus on the catering stuff. So look, let's jump into a few questions. One of them is actually pretty meaty, and we might start here. So what is the next trend that you think we would be seeing in the industry, and what should restaurants look to stay ahead of over the next 5 years, other than that universal tech stack integration? And the example is, in the same way we saw an explosion on-demand growth during COVID. So next 5 years, good Lord, I hope it's not COVID again. Like, let's just hope to God that doesn't happen. And assuming that doesn't, hopefully this is a good news story. So Marcus, I might go to you first. What do you think the big trend is in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I really look to like robotics, AI, and machine learning. And listen, we're not going to go to restaurants within the next 5 years and it be, robots like the Jetsons serving us. But I do think that you're going to see robotics and AI and voice AI starting to augment some of the labor challenges and needs that you see within restaurants, whether it's making pizzas or taking phone orders or taking drive-through orders. I just think brands and operators are going to do whatever they can to try and find ways to augment their labor needs through robotics and machine learning and some AI tools.
Okay, so Marcus sees RoboCop / Terminator coming into pizza kitchens. Brandy, what about you?
So I would say that RoboCop being tightly tuned into pricing. I think the advent of dynamic pricing, how that fits into a promotional strategy, building business during off-peak hours, looking at ways to soften demand during your peak hours, are all, I believe, natural evolutions of having digital menus out there in so many different facets. And we've typically advised restaurant groups on a promotional strategy that relates to that. Run your promotion, your $1 off, your BOGO on those Monday, Tuesdays when you're fighting for additional capacity in your restaurant, versus Fridays when there's a line out the door and the courier is trying to get some attention from the hostess while you have tons of other guests to seat.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mine is probably more recent because I think it's going to see an awful lot of proliferation. But in the same way, we don't see data centers in the middle of cities. We see data centers going out to appropriate locations for what they do, which is store a load of data and need a load of energy. I think we're going to see the next evolution of dark kitchens across all brands, where they're going to realize I have a brick and mortar business and that's one experience. And then I have off-prem and that's a completely separate business. And they're going to start to bifurcate because they're very different needs, very different cost lines. And in a world where off-prem is continuing to grow, which is incredible, I think you're going to see brands reinvest in that again and again and again. So on that, the next question is, okay, yeah, let's go with the dark kitchen kind of one. So, where is he gone? Oh, there he is. Sorry. So what is your take with third parties, the menu management, and dark kitchens, and Uber, in all honesty, kind of pioneering what I think is brilliant and cleaning up the Bob's Burgers, Bobby's Burgers, Bobo's Burgers, it's all the same thing, and it's just flooding the marketplace. So do you think there's more of that to come, Brandy?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, virtual restaurants are going to continue to be a key part of a digital strategy for many restaurant brands. Our push here is to have high quality virtual restaurants, and that is based on eater satisfaction. How are they rating your orders? Perhaps cancellation. I have 18 storefronts, but I'm canceling eaters' orders and we're never actually fulfilling them, as well as what is the unique value you're bringing to the marketplace? What is the differentiation that exists between your virtual restaurant menus and that of your brick and mortar? Because that is what is going to add value to the customer experience, as well as drive growth for the restaurant brand itself. And so I really think there's a way of looking at this instead of as a punitive action, as a way in which we are centralizing best practices and thought leadership across the industry so that people can grow and profit from virtual brands.
Yeah, I personally think, virtual brands and ghost kitchens are still like in the first inning. And I really do applaud Uber for doing this because I think to Alan's earlier point, there's a lot of bad actors in the space right now. And I think we're still trying to define like, what is a ghost kitchen? What is the relationship with the physical store? What does that ghost kitchen look like on, the third-party delivery apps, the marketplace apps, the first-party delivery apps? Can a restaurant implement, a new menu into their existing infrastructure so that they can add some new revenue streams like what Virtual Dining Concepts is doing? So I still think there's a lot of things that need to be fleshed out with virtual kitchens, but they are 100% going to be a major trend. They're here to stay, but kind of cleaning it up a little bit, having a little bit more transparency about where that food is coming from, what you're ordering, who's preparing that food, because all those things are very important to the consumer, and I think as, the marketplace, the position you took on kind of, leveling the playing field and adding a little bit layers of transparency is going to make people feel a little bit more comfortable with it, and obviously drive more frequency.
And without saying absolutely go and talk to Uber about this, Marcus, I might come back to you for this other question because it's really interesting. Like we kind of speak about education, right? And we speak about restaurants going to their core tech stack, and God knows I will take a phone call from any restaurant and just wax lyrical about what goes on in the ecosystem. And even if it's not ending up in a sale with VROMO, if we can help, that's what we're here to do. But outside of my diary being filled for 42 hours a day, what is the best way for somebody to go in and assess, actually, do I need tech? What tech do I need? Like, do you see a path of least resistance? Is that hopeful yellow brick road thinking, or is there a magic wand that you can wave to kind of demystify, do I work with Uber Direct and VROMO and kill it in off-prem? Like, what do you think the best way for a restaurant to do that is?
So I think we know, of course, reputation, speaking to friends in the industry, other experts is going to be first and foremost. What are your peers doing? Download the marketplace apps yourself. You don't have to order. You don't have to be tied into service for life. Look at who's on there and who is surrounding you from competition, because that's certainly how we've gathered insights in the past. You have a peek at someone else's menu. You see a restaurant with the line out the door. What is causing that to happen? Go into it yourself and understand some more about that experience. So I think asking questions, knowing, of course, there aren't stupid questions in this race as well. As Alan said, being able to speak to any restaurant operator out there, we will do the same. And, then you begin to take it to that next step. Okay, I have an outdated POS. Who are POS partners that I should be considering? What is the pricing? What is going to be the path of least resistance in order to onboard? Because you don't want to have your mind on a great solution that a year later still isn't implemented. That is not going to serve you or your guest as well. And so getting an understanding of that implementation timeline from your providers. What are the steps you've helped me with along the way? What should I be responsible for? And, everyone should be transparent as to those expectations.
You've got a good crew when you run out of time and there's like 4 other questions that you want to get to. But I think the beauty of this group and what I will certainly try and do, because there's two or three questions here that I think are really pointed. Like, how do I get on a third party? Do I do self-delivery? Do I not? What we might do is we might take these questions offline and put something together and distribute to everybody after, because this is very much, I think, the beginning of this conversation. I'm going to coin a phrase Marcus used a minute ago, and if dark kitchens are in the first innings, I think restaurant tech is probably in the second and maybe the third, and that would be about the height of it. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the webinar there. I'm going to thank my guests for honestly giving truthful and honest answers, which is always great because it makes the content an awful lot more engageable. But also being afraid to kind of go to maybe some places that we don't always want to admit. And the Uber Eats, the Uber Direct evolution, Marcus, I think you gave a very honest overview of the industry. We will definitely do it again. To our guests and our attendees, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We will follow up with some super engaging content and answer more of these questions that you've sent in. And then a personal shout out to the VROMO marketing team, Adriana and Shannon, who definitely wrangled this headless chicken and his friends into getting this webinar together. So thank you very much, guys, for all the effort. There's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes on, and to the Uber Direct team as well. They were fantastic. So thank you very much for attending another webinar. We will see you again soon. We hope to do another one next month. Bye for now. Thank you.